Welcome to Just Thinking. This is Mary Greendale. The title of this show grew out of a lifetime of curiosity about many different subjects. Some local, some global, and some in between. For each show, I will open with my thoughts and then bring on guests who explore the subject in greater detail. I hope the show inspires healthy discussions on camera and among viewers. To me, the sky's the limit when we are just thinking. Welcome to Just Thinking. Well, for today's show, I decided that I'd better do some research about the Office of Consumer Affairs before I had today's guest on. The complete title of this agency is the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. The scope of their work covers cable TV and telecommunications, insurance, banks and finance, licensing, and data privacy and security, which is what we'll talk a lot about. Inside state government, they are within the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. The agency deals with many different elements of business regulation and consumer interest. For example, it licenses real estate brokers, electricians, social workers, and more. Whether you are a homeowner or a renter, if you have a problem with a contractor or even a massage therapist, you might just want to contact them. The agency strives to educate Massachusetts consumers on their rights, but also on how to protect themselves from fraud and unscrupulous businesses. And with that in mind, let's get started. Today's guest is Greg White. He is Chief of Staff and General Counsel for the Office of Consumer Affairs in Boston. And welcome, Greg. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, really. So the Office of Consumer Affairs, I looked it up on the web. Certainly has an impressive website with lots and lots of information. Why don't you tell me about, from the inside out, what are you guys all about?
Sure. There's a common misconception out there. Many people, when they hear the Office of Consumer Affairs, think it's the Attorney General's office, which is an important part of the Attorney General's focus. They have the Consumer Protection Bureau, but we're our own separate entity. We're a state agency. And we have a fairly broad mandate. We have 5 regulatory agencies under our umbrella. We're under the, as you point out, the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. But within our own world, we have the Division of Banks, which oversees and regulates state-chartered banks and credit unions. They license mortgage brokers and debt collectors, amongst other things. We have the Division of Insurance, which regulates everything from the healthcare industry to property insurance to auto insurance, amongst other things. We have the Division of Standards, which, for the most part, their focus is inspecting fuel pumps, fuel trucks, to make sure that what's going into your gas tank is, in fact, what is being advertised. We have the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which, among other things, oversees the telecommunications and cable world. And finally, we have the Division of Professional Licensures, which oversees and licenses 375,000 trades in people in Massachusetts, from veterinarians to chiropractors to psychologists to massage therapists, quite a few industries. We like to say that if you were to go down to Main Street America, it's probably one of the businesses that the Division of Professional Licensure regulates. Mm-hmm. So that is kind of an overview of our broad world. Within our agency, we have a number of different areas that we focus on. We have a 800 number that is manned by students from Northeastern Co-op. We have 4 students, and they basically spend 6 months with us, and they answer a variety of calls from consumers. And if they don't have the answer, and they're not in the business of offering legal advice, but if they don't have the answer, then they direct the caller to the appropriate agency. And in addition to that, we have a number of law students from various law schools that also assist us.
That sounds like great internship opportunities for those folks.
It is.
Yeah, that's great.
It is. I mean, they get a number of calls from a variety. It's.
I'll bet.
I was talking to one of the students the other day, saying that, you know, when you finish up your internship, you're going to have a pretty broad overview of consumer rights. I mean,
Right.
they tell us what the most common scams are. You know, they'll say we're getting a number of calls on this type of scam, and so there are eyes and ears, if you will,
That's
out there.
wonderful.
In addition to that, we have the lemon law arbitration, which if you're aggrieved by buying a new or used car and you fit the criteria, we oversee the arbitration program. We oversee the do not call list.
I noticed that.
Yes, in conjunction with the Attorney General's
Yeah.
office, as well as the data breach. If a business is a victim of a data breach, they're required to notify the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation, along with the Attorney General's office. They have to notify us that there's been a breach, how many Massachusetts residents were impacted by that breach, and what steps they're taking to address that breach. In addition to that, one of our primary focuses is the Home Improvement Contractor Registration Program.
Yeah.
Which
That looked interesting.
it is interesting, and a lot of folks don't know about
Yeah.
the program. And basically, it requires every home improvement contractor who does a specific type of work in Massachusetts to register with the Office of Consumer Affairs. And for the most part, unless you're doing interior painting or putting in above-ground pools and you're doing a home improvement contract, you're required to register. And it's important that consumers know about that, because when you think of it, probably your biggest asset is your home. And when you have any work done to your home, very rarely can you have it done for a small amount of money.
Right.
Usually you have a bathroom done over, you're talking, 5 figures to do that work. So it's a huge investment on your biggest asset. And the Home Improvement Contractor Registration requires contractors to register with our office. They pay a registration fee every 2 years, as long as they're continuing to do work. It's a nominal fee when you think about it. It's $150, and considering what work goes into the home, it will allow that person to be registered in Massachusetts. In addition to that, they pay into what's called the Guaranteed Fund, and a lot of folks don't know about that as well. The Guaranteed Fund is basically set up, it's a trust fund, and it's designed to compensate homeowners who have been aggrieved by a contractor who either took the money and didn't do the work or did shoddy work. And if they meet the specific criteria, they can recoup up to $10,000. And the only way to have access to the Guaranteed Fund is to make sure that your contractor is registered. So homeowners should have a contract and have it in writing, and make sure the contractor is properly registered. And they can contact our office. We maintain a list, obviously, of those who are registered. We're also working with the town building inspectors. We've been in touch with them over the course of the last year, and they are not allowing contractors to pull permits if they're not properly registered. So working hand in hand with town building inspectors, as well as getting our word out, coming on shows like yours, it's helping to inform consumers about the responsibilities of home improvement contractors. And let me say this, there are a lot of fine contractors out there who do fantastic work, but they're, like any profession, there are those who don't live up to the standards, and we want to make sure that homeowners and consumers are properly protected. And I will add this, as part of the Home Improvement Contractor Program, we also oversee a complaint process. So if you've been aggrieved, you can file a complaint with the Office of Consumer Affairs. We have hearing officers that will conduct the hearings, and they can they can dismiss the complaint if they don't believe that there's a basis for it. They can fine the contractor. They can suspend or revoke their license. So there are protections and safeguards that homeowners have when they're having home improvement work done on their home.
That's very interesting,
Sure.
and I have to admit that I was not aware of that myself, so I'm glad that we did cover that. There was one thing that you mentioned that I believe would be under your purview, back in that do not call kind of thing. Dennis and I were just talking about this a minute ago. We got phone calls the other day that were our own name and phone number.
Sure.
Okay, first of all, how do they do that?
Right.
And then secondly, what's the point?
Well, there's a process out there in which you can obtain an app and basically assume someone's identity, if you will, and let me be specific, assume their phone number, you know, and we get telemarketers and people trying to scam individuals who utilize this. So in fact, we were meeting with a state rep about 6 months ago, and she said, my husband got a call, and it came up on my cell phone. So, you know, he answers the phone, and it was a telemarketer. They had found out her cell phone number and was able to utilize this app to suggest that it was his wife calling. And we have that with people conducting scams. And in a minute, I can talk about some of the scams
that'll be great.
that we routinely encounter. But it is a problem out there. And you know, people say, "Well, I'm on the do not call list." Well, great.
Good luck.
But if they're not abiding by the law,
right?
You know,
I still get calls.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and you know, the Office of Consumer Affairs, along with the Attorney General's office, oversees it, and you know, we can reach out to those folks, but a lot of times they're people trying to scam consumers, and they're not you know, they're not playing by the rules to begin with, so they're not going to adhere to a do not call list.
Right. I know I had somebody call me about Social Security a couple of weeks ago, you know, just saying that there was a problem and so forth. I hung up the phone and, you know, then I just called my accountant and said, I'm right that the Social Security office would contact me in writing, right?
Exactly. I mean,
yeah, definitely. So
we tell consumers never to provide their personal information over the phone, and that's kind of a lead into another area that I could chat about. Is the common types of scams that we see out there.
Yeah.
One of the most common is the impersonators. This is the one that we routinely see is or hear from is someone calling saying that they're from the IRS, that you owe X amount of dollars in back taxes, and unless you forward a money order, they're going to criminally prosecute you. We had a woman in our office, a young woman, who mother was receiving a dozen calls a day from this outfit. So I turned it over to one of our attorneys in our office, and I had him call, and it turns out they were from Seattle, Washington. And the attorney basically tried to converse with them. They were belligerent, they used profanity, and basically they said, what are you going to do about it? At which point the call was concluded when the attorney said, well, the next phone call will be from the Attorney General's office. The individual hung up, and that woman didn't receive any more phone calls. It turned out that it was a group operating out of Seattle, Washington. And I've heard it so often. There was an article in the Boston Globe a couple weeks ago about an individual, a group of individuals who had been a victim of this IRS scam. And in fact, actually, I'm mixing apples and oranges. This falls in line with the next scam, which is the fake lottery scam. This is a group of individuals who will call and they will say, you know, you've won the lottery.
Since I don't get caught by that because I've never bought anything.
Right,
so
exactly.
Fine.
Well, they'll say you've won the lottery, and we would like to send you a check. However, in order to do so, you need to pay the taxes on it. And again, the gist of this article was that a number of individuals had been victim of the scam. One individual in particular, I believe, if my memory serves me right, had sent in over $500,000 in what he believed were the taxes that he had to pay on the millions. And what they did to lure him in further is they said to him, they had contacted him 3 times about 3 specific lotteries. And at the 4th contact was from a group who purported to be from this organization and said, listen, you won the 3 lotteries, but by law, you can't collect on more than one in any given year. However, if you choose to be part of our association, we're allowed to combine those, so you're going to get one large check. And this individual, believe it or not, had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and didn't get a penny out of them. And so, you know, the best advice we have is, if it's too good to be true,
don't believe it.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other one is the grandparent scam. I don't know if you've heard of this. This is a group that goes out there and goes on Google and finds out as much as they can about an individual. And it's interesting. I think we were talking before the show about the cybersecurity conference that we had, and we had an agent from the FBI, and he was saying, which is true, is so much of your information is out there in the public. I mean, if you own a home, you can go and you can find out how much that person paid for the home. What's the square footage?
Yep.
You can even get satellite shots of the home. I was checking out the value of my home and went online, and there are pictures taken from the air of my home. So you can find out so much. You go on Facebook, you can find out so much about that individual, whether or not they have any children, whether or not they're going to school, whether or not they have any grandchildren, what have you. And this particular group will call, they'll learn as much as they can about an individual, and they will call purporting to be from a foreign jurisdiction. They'll find out, for instance, that we recently had a call from a individual who was almost victim to the scam. Their granddaughter was studying in France, and this individual found this out and pretended to be from an agency in France, saying that your granddaughter was arrested. She's being held on $5,000. If you want to release, you need to send the bond money to this address. And in one particular case, they did. They sent $5,000, and then
my poor grandkids better not count on that to happen.
There you go. There you go.
Big check and a lot more than that.
Right, exactly. So, but this one particular individual ended up sending the money, and it's gone. You know, the last one.
Well, it's easy to believe, and obviously they're tapping into your fear.
Exactly.
You know, and make you vulnerable.
Yeah.
And then you're more likely to act on it.
And if they know your granddaughter or grandson's name, they know who he's studying with, what college he's going at.
Sounds legitimate.
It sounds legitimate, and that's what they do. They prey on your fears, and they obtain as much personal information as need be to gain your trust, and hope that you'll buy it. And we advise people to hang up, you know, and reach out to your grandchild or the school, what have you. And the last one is the One Ring. Have you heard of the scam? I learned it the hard way. What it is it's a group, many of them are operating out of the Caribbean, and they will get people's cell phone numbers, and they'll call and they'll let it ring once. That's the term, one ring, and then they'll hang up. So as most people do, is they see a missed call, they don't recognize the call, they want to know who's calling their number, so they call that individual. Well, you're calling overseas, and they keep you on the phone as long as they can to increase the bill. I don't know how they're
drive up the cost
to drive
of the
up
call.
the cost of the call.
How do they get it?
I don't know how they work it out, but somehow they're connected to that. And we've gotten quite a few calls from consumers. And in fact, as I said, I was at work and I get this call, and of course I call it back. And I didn't stay on that long. I Googled it and found out it was in the Caribbean, and I talked to one of my attorneys and said, oh, that's the One Ring scam. So
that's a hard way to find out that there's a scam out there, though.
Exactly.
I don't recommend that.
No, you don't. The better bet is, if you don't recognize the number, don't call them back, especially if it turns out it's in a foreign country. So those are our most common types of scams, from the IRS impersonators to the grandparent to the fake lottery to the One Ring. Which leads me to the most common types of identity theft that we see at the Office of Consumer Affairs. the one that most people are familiar with are the hackers. They go, they find your password, and they hack into your system. Recently, my brother, who's overseas in Amsterdam, called me or emailed me to say, you need to change your password. You've been victim of a breach. And what we advise our consumers is don't use a 4-digit password or 5-digit. Mix it up with letters and uppercase, lowercase. Don't use names that would be common to you, your name, your mother's maiden name, what have you. So I did. I went and I changed it. I went from a 5-digit password to a 6-digit password followed by 2 names, upper and lowercase. And not too long ago, my son and I were running a half marathon in Philly, and just before the gun went off, my iTunes went dead. So he said to me, what's your password? And so I told him, by the time you entered it in, it was so long, 10,000 runners had gone by us. So, but it, the likelihood of someone, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I do too. It's like nobody, including me, can remember.
Right, can remember it.
But that's okay.
So, we advise.
Can I ask you a question though? Would it have been possible that the email from your brother wasn't from your brother?
It could be, but what is he going to get from it? Just saying change your password. If
true. So it's not like you're revealing what you're going to change it to.
And more importantly, I reached out to him.
Okay.
And that's what we advise consumers is just don't take a phone call or an email from someone who's purporting to be who's asking you to do something. Like, I'm sure you've been victim of this, where all of a sudden you'll get an email from someone you're familiar with and wanting you to click on a diet or this or that, and they basically hacked into your network, and they're using. I'm an attorney, and I was out in the Worcester County area, and they hacked into my whole network of attorneys, saying, you got an email from Greg White, and the next thing you know, you click on, and it's some scam for some type of product. So, but by changing your password often and not using a very simple password, that's one way to protect yourself. And also, I was on a show down in the Cape last year and last month, and she was talking about computers at work, and just not leaving your information around so that anyone can pick up on that. The other common type of identity thefts is from dumpster divers. Have you heard about this?
I have, and I find it, I get squeamish just thinking about anybody being willing, but
yeah. And someone said to me recently, no one ever goes to the dump in my town. I said they don't have to. They just have to go to the end of your driveway.
That's right. You could do it in the middle of the night on trash night, right?
Exactly. People put old tax returns and bills in there, a lot of personal information, and people literally will go through your trash. And we advise consumers to invest in a paper shredder. You can get them up for pretty short money, and don't be putting in any documents in your trash that contain your personal information. The one that we're seeing quite a bit of, and I actually gave you one of our protective sleeves, is skimmers. Now, you had mentioned before the show that you're somewhat familiar with that?
Yeah. I actually have 3 that I picked up at the bank.
Okay.
They were not plastic, though. They were a little green. It almost looked like paper or something.
Paper, okay.
Something like that.
Well, there's a material in there that
opens.
will prevent them from accessing your information via a skimming device. And do you know how the skimmers work?
I have no clue. And even I know on the website, there's a whole series of pictures of trying to explain it to me. I still didn't get it.
Well, the way it works, they do it in a variety of ways, and it's scary to think that you can be a victim of a skimming scam and you're not even aware of it.
Right.
What they'll do, and the reason for that is you'll put your credit card in it. On a couple of shows, one show in particular, I ended up pulling my credit card and put it in there to show. And the host, who was a chief of police, thought it was a phony credit card, so he held it up to the camera.
Oh, that was helpful.
So I'm being victimized by the chief of police on a show.
That's helpful, yeah.
So that's
You don't
the
do that
reason why
anymore,
I
huh?
don't give you my credit card. So you'll put your credit card in there, and
Yeah.
what they'll do if your credit card is simply in a wallet or purse is they'll brush up against you with a skimming device at a mall, a train station, at an
Yep.
airport, and they'll download all your information out in the credit
That comes
card.
right off of
Right
it.
off that.
Okay.
And
And it even gets like the little code on the back.
it gets
gets
everything,
everything.
you know. And
Okay.
so what they'll do is they will then, use that information, and they get it from a variety of ways. One of it is the skimmers that they warned you. The other, and we're seeing more of this, and we're updated through our Division of Standards, which inspects fuel pumps. So when you go and you purchase gas, you'll see a little tag, inspected by so-and-so.
Right.
That they're either from the Division of Standards or they're from the local municipality, and they'll inspect them periodically. And what they're finding is that these machines, from time to time, have been compromised. The seal's been broken, and they'll open up the machine, and then they'll simply a gas pump.
Let's see if we can show this. Which camera? No. Can you get that?
On the picture on
Okay,
my
so
left,
you've got
you're
this,
right.
Yeah, so you've got, this is just like any old
Yeah.
gas station.
Right, and inside you can see some wiring. Well,
Yeah,
part of that
okay.
wiring is a Bluetooth skimming device, and this is what it looks like. That's another photograph of it. And what they'll do is they'll attach that to the interior of the fuel pump. You'll go and you put your gas card in, your credit card in, and it's downloading all your information. Now, you don't even know you've been a
Right.
victim of that
Right.
security breach.
So now let me ask you.
Sure.
So who's responsible for checking inside that little door on the front of the pump?
Well, certainly our inspectors, but
But-
they're not
but
going
they're
out
not
there
going every day.
So we just sent, because our licensees do it on a periodic basis, as part of the process, we have sent out a letter notifying them of protocols that should be put in place. Checking your pumps at night, because they'll go in the middle of the night when the
Sure.
gas station, but there's seals on the side of the pump, and make sure that they haven't been tampered with. And if in fact they have, we advise them to call the local police department, and they'll call the Division of Standards. They'll send out an inspector. And usually we tie it in with the FBI or the Secret Service, and they'll come. Now, it's interesting because that picture shows a Bluetooth device. Now, when we had the cybersecurity conference, I was talking to the agent. He said back when these first came out, we would get a call that a machine has been tampered with. We'd go and we'd inspect the fuel pump, and lo and behold, there's a skimmer in there. So we had set up a surveillance. We're waiting for them to come back and retrieve their skimming device. No longer. They access it through Bluetooth.
Yeah,
so they don't,
we've made it easier.
Yep, so they don't, they lose the device, but it's cost of doing business.
Yeah, right.
So that's another way. The third way, and it's becoming, again, more prominent, is at ATM machines. What they'll do is they'll take the place where you put the slot where you put the credit, and they'll
card.
put a device over it.
Well, let's try this. So there's a little sleeve that's
that
been
goes
put
over,
right over
the slot.
the real place.
Exactly. And they'll add to that a lot of times, but they'll put a camera on the side. They'll mount a very small camera, and when you're punching in your password, it's capturing that password. So in addition to downloading the information from the card, now you haven't even been made aware of that until.
Right. Look at this little camera, guys.
Yep.
I mean, it's just amazing. Wow.
So
we've got. We have one ATM in town that I can think of anyway. That's actually so outside. I mean,
Right.
it's just totally outside.
We had a bank in the South Shore.
Can I keep these?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
A few weeks ago that had been, it was a credit, it wasn't a bank, it was a credit
Union, maybe?
union. And they learned that a skimmer had been put on the machine, and there are over 900 consumers who had their information compromised. So we're advising banks, because we oversee the division of banks, to notify credit unions and state-chartered banks that they should have protocols put in place to, I mean, they go and they deposit money in there for people to take out, and they retrieve money in there periodically. At the same time, do a physical inspection, because at the end of the day, for the little time it takes them to inspect the machines, it's a lot less of a hassle than notifying 900 of your customers that your personal information has been compromised. The FBI had told us about one story, and I learned just today from our director of the Division of Standards, that this is a huge problem in Florida, Michigan, and upper state New York. This FBI agent had told us about a mom and pop store that had been a victim of a skimming device, and it was in a high tourist area. And over a period of time, the skimming device retrieved countless personal information of individuals using this machine. And the individuals who were responsible for this were a group out of organized crime out of Eastern Europe, and they retrieved all the information. They then sent it worldwide to a number of countries, to their contacts in there, with the caveat that they were not supposed to release the information until a certain date and time, at which point they notified them, and within a number of hours, millions of dollars had been lost through this skimming device. And that's just one particular mom and pop store up in upper state New York. So it's a huge problem. So we also tell consumers, when you go to an ATM machine, kind of look around, because at the end of the day, some of those are more sophisticated than others, but some of them can easily be identified as a attachment to the portion of the machine that you're putting your credit card in, or your ATM card, I should say. So there are a lot of different ways. Using those sleeves are helpful. Being observant, checking your, you can get a credit report once a year and check on it.
You can get it at your website, I noticed today, too. Must be a link to
There's a link to, the three big ones. But check your credit report. Recently, my wife and I were having some work done on our home, and we were talking to one of the contractor's employees, and she said, "Oh yeah," she said, "Oh, you're with the Office of Consumer Affairs. You're advising consumers about identity theft." She said, "Recently, I went to refinance, and I learned that someone had taken my personal information, had obtained a mortgage for a condominium in her name, so she owned a condominium that she wasn't even aware of, and had leased a brand new vehicle in her name. Wasn't even aware of it until she went to refinance." So we advise consumers to check your credit report, look at your bank statements, and just be more proactive when it comes to protecting your personal information.
Wow. That's all real scary stuff, I have to tell you.
Yeah, it is. And someone said to me, in fact, the undersecretary said to the FBI agent, how do you protect yourself? And he said, short of going back in the dark ages where you're just using cash and not using a computer, which good luck, surviving out there, there is no way, And so by looking at your bank statements and making sure that everything that is purported on there is, in fact, your purchases and your transactions. And then periodically getting a credit report. And then if you are a victim of a breach, the first thing you do is you cancel your credit card. You can notify the local police department, but their hands are tied. This chief was telling me that they receive a dozen calls. It's a small town in central Mass, a dozen calls a day, but their hands are tied. Usually this organization is operating out in a
different country.
I mean, when I began my career, I was a prosecutor, and back in the day, identity theft consisted of you dropping your wallet and someone taking, and now it's the person doesn't even have to leave their home to get your information. So,
we've made it very easy for ourselves, but also for the crooks, for anybody who wants to do bad things. We've made it easier.
Exactly. So,
well, this is very interesting. A little bit just alarming, particularly when I think about the ATM. But anyway. This has been great. Is there anything else you want to add? I know I don't want to keep you. I know you have.
I would just let your viewers know that if they do have any questions and concerns, we maintain a toll-free number 1-888. I said 3/8, right?
Yeah, we'll count them. 1-888. Yeah, I think so.
283-3757, and our Boston number is 617-973-8787. So,
and that's where we'll get the consumer hotline, and that's where we have those Northeastern students and others who
will happily answer any questions you have,
great.
and if they don't have the answer, they will direct you to the appropriate agency.
That's great. That's really great. Well, I'm really, really glad that you've been able to come on here, and I know we're catching you as you're moving to the central Massachusetts to do other business tonight, but thank you very much for coming on.
Well, thanks again for having me, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks. Well, okay, everybody, time to dig out your own reports and so forth and get your own things in order. I know I need to do it myself. So that was Consumer Affairs. Next, coming up, we will be talking about the 8 Arch Bridge, which has become one of my favorite passions and things to talk about these days. So tune in next time, and see you around. Bye.
Finding that they use